Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Scarlet Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell. You're here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast, joined now by our friends Paul Sweeney, as well as Molly Smith. We welcome our audiences across Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg Radio, as well as our partnership with YouTube. I think we're having some technical difficulties with them, Scarlett. We'll connect with them in just a minute here. But, I mean, you talk about this idea that we're kind of through a big chunk of earnings season right now, right? That's over. So what's the catalyst? The Fed's over. There's no economic data this week.
There's a lot of Fed speak.
Oh, you're into the Fed speak.
I am when we need a catalyst, and Jay Powell will be speaking later on this week. But yeah, we've got a lot of data points to fill in before the next Fed decision. So it's true, we're looking for catalysts, and the catalyst at this point, as it's been for the last couple of weeks, is bond yields.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, though. But, I mean, does this just continue to sort of drive the volatility? That if bond yields are up, then that means stocks are going to have to go down? That's the correlation we're talking about now?
Well, except it's not really happening today either.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pin it down. I think what's really fascinating, I love the question that you posed to Charles Lemonides, which was, are narratives still driving this market? I feel like we've been searching for a narrative. We've been looking for one. And when we can't find one, people are too eager to impose one on the market.
Yeah, well, certainly so, and that's the problem.
For instance,
right
yields
now.
have peaked, right? This idea, I mean, there's nothing reasonably that points out that yields have peaked, except that we wanted them to peak because it's a good talking point.
All right, I think we have our radio colleagues now tapped in here to their microphones here, and I'm curious, Paul, here what you thought of some of the price action today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just asking a couple of our guests earlier. It was such a busy week last week, both in terms of the bond market and then how the equity markets just followed the bond market, and so it just seems like today was just a calmer day. Everybody just kind of reassessing where we are after last week's big moves. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, of course, coming off what was, of course, the best week, at least for some of the major indices all year long. Not so much today here. You did have all of the major indices open higher on the day, but it looked like almost all of them spent a significant time in the red. The net effect of it all is basically unchanged on the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average higher by 0.1%, right around that 34,000 level. The S&P 500 up 0.2%, below that 4,400 level. The Nasdaq Composite up about 0.3%, right now camped out at 13,500 and change. And the Russell 2000 never really got any traction all day long, off the lows of the day, but still lower on the day by about 1.3%.
And when you look at market breadth, it's definitely to the downside. You have 344 stocks lower for every 158 stocks higher in the S&P 500. Looking at the industry groups, pretty evenly balanced as well. Tech, hardware, pharma, and household and personal products leading the gains there. And on the downside, REITs, energy, and diversified financials all lower by at least 0.8%.
All right, definitely some gainers out there today in the marketplace. First, Constellation Energy. This utility is higher after better than expected results. They also had EBITDA, taking their guidance up on EBITDA. So for a company that pays dividends, EBITDA is important. Eli Lilly, Chief Scientific Officer, said he is extremely optimistic that a major Alzheimer's breakthrough drug is coming. And Bloomberg's own Sam Fazeli, I believe, was at that meeting up in Boston. Booking Holdings higher as an analyst at D.A. Davidson upgrades the stock to a buy. So I guess people are still out there traveling.
Going to kick it off here on the decliners then, on the flip side of all of that, with Dish. This is a rough day for Dish. Oof. Oh, boy, is right, Paul. Yeah, worst stock decline on record for Dish today after reporting a disappointing third quarter revenue and drop in wireless customers. That was a lot worse than what analysts predicted. We're talking they lost 5 times as many mobile customers as what analysts had set out. So Dish now the shares were down 37%. A record one-day drop.
And we should point out EchoStar, which they're merging with, was also down 30% here on the day.
Yeah, guys, I followed Charlie Ergen's companies for 30 years, and he was just money. But the last 7, 8, 9 years, he's made this bet on Spectrum, and it has been the wrong bet.
Very painful to watch that one today. Shifting over to then Paramount Global, another one that did not have a great day today. This one was a slide of down, ended the day down around $12 after B of A, and this was an analyst that you know well, Paul.
Jessica Reif. Yep.
Right, yeah, one of the biggest media analysts in the industry, that she cut Paramount Global down to underperform from buy. That's a double downgrade. See, it doesn't see a good pipeline there for asset sales. Last one I was looking at today.
And I just point out, too, I mean, she was very specific, though. I mean, she kind of singled out BET and Showtime and really just asked the question as to why. And she seemed to imply that there have been offers on the table. I don't know if we ever got official confirmation from Paramount. But if that is the case, it does raise the question as to what they saw and why they felt they had to pass.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not sure that we had that as well, but I also got that impression. It was a bit vague as to what exactly isn't she seeing? What did Paramount possibly pass up on? That I don't know, maybe a little bit of some knowledge there that she's privy to that maybe the rest of us aren't. And the last one that I was looking at on the decliners today, this is Solar Edge. It's gotten a lot of downgrades lately. Wells Fargo, the latest of which on the solar equipment supplier in the wake of a weak revenue forecast last week. So one of the biggest percentage decliners in the S&P 500 today.
Let's take a look at the yield space course, because that drove a lot of the broader market price action. Yields higher all across the board here on this Monday afternoon. Coming across, of course, we talk about the big week that stocks had. We should point out last week was also a big week for treasuries, at least for the benchmark 10-year yield. That was the best performance on a price basis that we had seen, I believe, going back to March of this year. But that is now being sort of clawed back in a pretty big way. 9 basis points lower on the 2-year, about 8 basis points lower on the 10-year here. And, of course, a lot of concerns right now, guys, about treasury supply. Another busy week for auctions. Of course, we have a 3-year, 10-year, and a 30-year auction all taking place over the span of the next 3 trading days.
All right, we also have some earnings. It's, as we've been talking about, most of the big earnings have come out, but we do have numbers out of TripAdvisor. And the third quarter numbers do beat analyst estimates, whether you're looking at revenue or the bottom line. Revenue of $533 million, better than the expected $505 million that analysts were anticipating. It also was an increase of 16% from a year ago. Yeah. Adjusted EPS of 52 cents also beats the consensus estimate as well by 6 cents. Analysts were looking for 46 cents. So TripAdvisor right now up about 3%.
You know what I thought was interesting? There was an interesting upgrade earlier today on Booking, Booking Holdings.
Yeah, Paul mentioned
and the analyst over there, over at D.A. Davidson, was talking about this idea of discretionary spend and how, yes, overall it may be going down, but at least in their view, the idea was that we were going to see more of that spend to travel, that was going to be, they were going to sacrifice other discretionary items, other discretionary services in favor of continuing to travel.
I mean, you've got to then, from the economic lens, because that's, of course, the way that I'm going to look at this, and see, if TripAdvisor's up and we're looking at what's pretty good outlook for them, and I'm hearing all these reports of that the consumer is about to have its worst fourth quarter, kind of hard to square those two, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to be looking at the retail sales coming out up shortly, as well as earnings from the retailers coming up. They're always kind of the tail end of the earnings cycle, but that'll give us a good sense of where this consumer is.
Yeah, and it gets also to the point, too, the idea that if there is sort of material softness here, when does that start to trickle into some of those sectors that I think had held up pretty well here, whether we're talking about consumer travel or some of the other services that we talk a lot about on this show, Scarlett. I mean, what's the breaking point?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when you get to retail and especially apparel companies, that's where the rubber meets the road, whether people are going to continue spending on items that have only gotten more expensive given labor costs, given material costs, given shipping costs.
I know. I mean, here we are, folks. It is November. It is holiday shopping season. So, I mean, I want to really hear from the retailers about what they think about this holiday season, because as we all know, that makes or break the year for most of these retailers.
Yeah, and so far, Paul, the outlook has not been that great. We were looking at the biggest U.S. toy makers not too long ago in the last couple weeks, those really bad outlooks coming out of Mattel and Hasbro, and the hiring, too, that we've seen in the job space of things, that the seasonal hiring announcements really slow so far this year. So that's also not adding to such a festive mood going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, we're talking about retail, I guess, to some extent. I just saw this cross the wire here. This is on Overstock or Bed Bath & Beyond, whatever we're calling it right now here. We had learned earlier in the day that they appointed a new interim CEO and president. Now we're learning from the company here that the board had asked Jonathan Johnson to step down as chief executive officer. Now, it doesn't exactly say why here, but interesting moves. We were just talking a little bit earlier on the TV program with Scarlett and Katie about some of the C-suite changes, whether it's over at Pepsi and Disney or over at, Bumble, which I know you're a big fan of, Paul.
Sure.
And then even over there at at Dish with you mentioned Charlie Ergen, but of course this new tie-up with EchoStar, they've sort of just picked, I guess, the current president and CEO over at Dish to helm that combined company.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. I mean, it's a Charlie Ergen play. That's what investors are betting on, but there's a lot to prove there.
Yeah, all right.
How much room does whoever's taking over have to do anything when Charlie Ergen's kind of overseeing the entire enterprise, right?
Exactly, and investors are just betting on Charlie, listen to Charlie's every word, and so far he has not been able to monetize all that spectrum he bought over the last 6, 7, 8 years, and that's a real problem.
All right, always great to have Paul Sweeney on with that type of knowledge there, and our thanks to Molly Smith. That does it for our cross-platform coverage of the market close on Bloomberg Television, Radio, and YouTube. And a reminder, Bloomberg Business Week is now on Bloomberg Originals. We'll be back with Paul and the rest of the gang there in our radio studio, same time, same place.